What's up, guys? This is going to be a fun one here. This is something I've been asked about quite a bit, and that is people want to see my mounts and to see the deer that I do have on the wall. I think I've got 8 total on a European mount, so I wanted to run through them. I'm going to run through them chronologically in order I killed them and give you just a little short story behind each one. This one is the first one I ever put on the wall, and he's a pretty tight basket rack 8-pointer, and I killed him when I was 18 years old, and that was in 2009. And he was actually a muzzleloader kill, and I've got 2 of the 8 that are on the wall that are gun kills, and you're going to see a kind of a reoccurring theme between both of them. This deer right here, I was hunting a buddy's property. We hunted that property for 2 or 3 years with him, and we were always able to kill a lot of does. Saw some young bucks, but never saw. We'd see good bucks during the summer, have them on trail camera, but never could kill one. Well, the final year, I killed him the final year I hunted out there, and going into that season, I knew if I wanted to kill a good buck, I was going to have to do something different than what we had been doing. And I had one corner of the property that we never really hunted very much, and I went in there and scouted and hung a stand and didn't hunt it pretty much all year until opening day of muzzleloader season, which in Tennessee is right around the first weekend in November. Climbed up in the stand. It was probably an hour and a half after daylight or so, and here he come right to me. I shot him at 25 yards, almost facing me, quartered to me really, really hard. So he was in bow range, was going to be even closer. But that was the first good buck I was ever able to kill. He's a really cool deer. He's very tight but tall, and I'll show you his main beams in the front actually cross, and he's a pretty cool deer for your first nice deer to put on the wall. So that was 2009 muzzleloader kill, 25 yards. And like I said, you'll see a theme with that before we get done with it. So that brings us to this guy. And this is a 9-pointer. This is the property you've seen me hunt a lot, even to this day. I'd killed several deer on this property before him, but this is by far the biggest at that time. And like I said, 2013, killed him with a rifle. This was the last time I carried a gun in the woods. 2013, I think it was 2 days after Christmas, so December 27th. I was hunted really, really hard that year and had killed a couple of bucks early in the season that were nice, but not wall worthy. At that time, I hadn't completely committed to killing only big deer. We were still having a lot of fun with it, but this is kind of the point where I started really targeting some bigger deer. But 2 days after Christmas, it was cold, and I was still grinding it out, trying to fill that last tag, and got up early that morning, didn't feel like going, still went, climbed up a tree, and he come out the ridge, and I shot him at 5 steps from the base of my tree, out of my tree stand. And from that point forward, I said I was not gun hunting anymore. And there's certain scenarios I could see myself gun hunting. I still shotgun hunt turkeys, but that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back as far as whitetails go. And pretty cool deer. Had no clue, had never seen him before. That property picks up a lot of new deer throughout the rut and throughout the season. It was kind of just one of those right place, right time deals. Really not much strategy in it, like being late in the season, and I was hunting with a gun. I was kind of in a tree that I hunted a lot back when I gun hunted because I could see quite a bit. But the ironic thing is I ended up shooting him, like I said, at about 5 steps. So after that, no more gun hunting. And since then, I don't believe I've taken a gun into the deer woods at all. Pretty cool deer, 9-pointer. That was the biggest deer I'd killed at that time. There was a pretty big gap. Like I said, that other one was 2009. This one was 2013. Still hunted in there. We killed a lot of deer. Just didn't kill any big deer. Me and Logan had just started hunting together in the middle of that span, and we were just having a good time, honestly. Those are probably some of my favorite years as a hunter. just me and him bow hunting together and pretty much killing anything we could. That's kind of where you gain a lot of experience. That's where, there's no substitute for actually getting out and killing deer. So those years were very, very important in who I became as a hunter. But that was 2013 9-pointer. As far as favorite deer on the wall and favorite deer stories, this is probably my favorite. He's not the biggest deer I have on the wall, not the biggest deer in Tennessee, but he's cool, and it's mainly the story behind him that means so much to me. The year was 2015, and that was actually the first year that I began self-filming, which is a whole nother challenge in its own right. By this point, I was only targeting good bucks, 3.5-year-old or better. In Tennessee, that's like, that's a top 10% deer, if not higher. And that year was a struggle the whole time. Or through early bow season, I didn't even have a deer to hunt that met my criteria. Never could get in front of anything. And I got drawn for that quota hunt. I actually got drawn twice. That you saw me and John Boy hunt in December this year. And I went down there and had an awesome hunt. Saturday, saw a ton of deer, kind of like you saw on the previous video. It was very similar to that, with the exception of I had a monster 8-pointer, like 18 inches wide, close to 130 inches, that just got downwind of me right before I was able to shoot him. He was about 40 yards. Behind him was a big 10-pointer that at the time was probably in the 140s. Mainframe 10-pointer, split G2. Like I said, that was 2015. That evening, I decided to shoot a doe. Had a doe come in, give me a good opportunity, facing left, and shot her, hit at 20 yards, hit her back. Probably hit her 8 inches back. And I felt like it was probably a liver shot, and I wanted to just be safe, give her overnight, because this is not long before dark. And so my game plan the next morning was to get up, hunt till about 9 o'clock, get down, find the doe, get her out, checked in, and then come back in for the evening hunt. Well, for one reason or another, I'd seen some deer, and I decided to wait till 10 o'clock. And it got to 10 o'clock on the dot, and I said, I'm going to give it 5 more minutes, and then I'm out. I got to go get this doe. It was real cold that morning. Well, I no more than said that, looked up. Here's a pretty 8-pointer, probably 115 inches or so, following 2 does right to me. The does come right underneath my stand. The buck, for whatever reason, stays out about 35 yards. Draw back, make what I thought was a good shot, or what probably was a good shot, and hit, a foot, 18 inches to the right again. Ended up having a bow issue that I found out once I got home. The rest had moved. But I knew immediately it was a gut shot, which I knew was fatal. But the quirk with this was on that quota hunt, at the end of the hunt on Sunday, you can't get back in there. And kind of finding out later, if you get the right game warden, he might go back in there with you. It just depends. It's kind of a 50-50 thing. But I'd always known it to be, and it even said on the permit that, once it's done, it's done. You can't go back. So I gave him as much time as I could. I shot him at 10, got out, went to track the doe, found her. Coyotes had ripped her clean. It was almost down to bare bones and a head. So that was pretty deflating, and I ended up giving the deer the buck until about 3:30, 4 o'clock before I started tracking. Tracked him to bed, jumped him, was never able to recover him. Got home, I was sick. That's still to this day the only buck I've ever lost with a bow, or only deer I've ever lost with a bow to this day. And I was sick. I come home and it was the middle of the rut. I didn't feel like hunting. Took about a week or 10 days off and didn't even get in the woods. And then I started grinding again. Saw deer, didn't see a deer big enough. Had some close calls with some decent deer, but nothing I wanted to shoot. And then this morning, it's December 10th, 2015, and I got up in the stand, and literally right at first light, like before legal light even, I heard a grunt, and I could hear footsteps coming closer to me. And I checked my watch, and at that time it was 2 minutes before legal light or so. And it took them about 7-8 minutes to get down to me, and I could tell that the first one was a doe come out, and then behind her was this buck. But it was still kind of in that gray light, you know, right at the beginning of legal light in the woods. It can be a little hard to shoot, you know. So by the time they make it to me, it's a few minutes after legal light. And I could make out that he had a really big body, and I could see this main beam come out quite a ways. And I was like, good enough for me. It's late season. I haven't killed anything. He looks like a great deer. I'm going to shoot him. Shot him, not knowing really how big he was. And when I found him, I was just blown away at how awesome this deer was. As you can see, he was broke off on that left side. And if he hadn't been broke off on that left side, he would have grossed right at Pope and Young in Tennessee. He's actually 100 inches like he sits without a G3, the rest of his main beam. He's got awesome brow tines. But I tell this story a lot as deer season starts to get later and later in the year, and a lot of people haven't filled tags or kind of down in the dumps. I always tell this story about just how you shouldn't give up. You never know when it's going to happen. Generally for me, I've killed some deer in December, but I don't see many deer. It'll just be poof, there they are, and you've got an awesome buck like that that's in bow range, and you're able to fill your tag in just a matter of, you know, a few minutes. But by far, favorite deer, well, one of my favorite deer and favorite story. Also thought I would add really quick that both of these deer that I just showed you are Mackenzie 64D shoulder mounts. The first one I showed you I think is a 6500, but these 64Ds are really hard to beat for a good mount because they, with their head down, that's what the D stands for. It has their head down, and I think it really shows off their antlers pretty well. They've also got a 64U, which is a head up. It's also a pretty good mount. This is where deer start getting familiar for you guys. Obviously, there's a bunch of deer I've killed that I didn't mount, but these are just the ones I have on the wall. This deer is a Mackenzie 6900 wall pedestal. It's one of my favorite forms I've ever had, that I've ever seen. If you're in the market for a wall pedestal, get a 6900. I mean, it's really hard to beat. This deer is my Ohio public land buck from 2017. He grossed right at 152 inches. Pretty cool story. So for several years, Logan, from probably about 2015 or 2016 on, Logan was on me pretty hard wanting to go out of state to hunt. And at that time, I just wasn't ready. Now, that was a mistake on my part. You need to go as soon as possible. The sooner you can go, the sooner you can begin the learning curve. But we decided to go to Ohio, called a buddy of ours that we both knew, and kind of asked some questions about what would be a good area to go to, what part of the state, you know, that sort of thing. And he kind of pointed us in the direction of southeast Ohio. And my whole stipulation with going out of state is I told Logan that I didn't want to half-ass it, for lack of a better term. I didn't want to go up there in November without any clue of anything about where to hunt and just go in totally blind. I don't mind to do that so much now, but that was a whole new experience to us that year. So you can go back. This is actually, I think, the second video on the Rocky Top Bow Hunting channel. And it's probably one of the worst quality videos that I've got. There was no recovery, very little footage of the deer coming in. He was on the wrong side of the tree. I literally just took the camera and slung it around the back side of the tree and pointed it in the direction of him. And that was the best I could do. Since then, thankfully, the videos have gotten better. At least I think so. Hopefully you think so. But we went up in, I think, Labor Day 2017. And they went up a day earlier. I worked that day, got off, went up. And we only scouted for a half a day together. And that half a day, I was very uninspired with what we had found. I did not feel good about it. They decided to go home, and I said, I'm going to stay. If I leave right now, I'm not going to feel good about it. Well, I'd picked apart a bunch of different areas, and there was one area in particular that I hadn't hit. And I went in to look at it, saw some sign, not what I wanted. And on the way out, I was like, well, I'll go this way. And I looked at it on the map, looked like it'd be pretty good. Well, one thing led to another, and I ended up finding a great area. It was creek bottom. Felt very confident about it. None of the other stuff I felt like I could kill a deer if it was right place, right time, but I didn't feel like a good buck lived there. You know, at this point, it was my first time out of state, but I had some pretty good experience with going to areas I was unfamiliar with and just having to scout and find deer. I'd kind of gotten to the point where I knew how to find them, I knew what to look for, or at least I thought I did, and so I just hadn't seen what I wanted to, and I ended up finding it. That particular deer we scheduled off 10 days, like November the 11th through the 19th or something, and I wanted to go up earlier too, so I took 2 3-day weekends. Last weekend in October, first weekend in November, and then the 10-day trip starting on the 11th. And that worked out perfect. Since then, I like to go just one big block because it's a little easier on me. But at that time, those first 2 trips were very, very important for me to get myself in the right position for when I come back on the 11th. So I kind of hunted some different spots in that area, and I ended up moving on the first November trip, the long weekend. And so when I come back on the 11th, first morning in the tree, I was exactly where I needed to be. Had an awesome hunt. It was like 20 degrees that morning. Sat all day, dark to dark, and saw some good deer. I actually saw about 130, 35-inch buck that I didn't get a shot at, and glad I didn't. But about right at sunset, I heard obviously a buck. You can tell a difference in how they walk most of the time. And he come off the ridge in front of me on a beeline right to me. And wasn't walking around stuff, he was just walking through it. He was on a mission. And shot him at 10 yards. Well, it was probably 15 actually. But he had almost got to the point he was facing away from me. And I shot him, it went in like right about the spine, just this side of the spine. And it didn't come out, but it was, once he got skinned, you could see it was right in the armpit. It was a perfect shot. And he ran out there, was 99.9% sure he fell, crashed, and then I lost my mind. But backed out, went and got Logan, got help, and we couldn't find any blood. And it was a super thick creek bottom, and you weren't going to find a body in the dark. So we had to leave him overnight, which is why there's no recovery video. But that was my first out-of-state public land buck. Was super happy with him. I mean, that exceeds all expectations. But that was 2017. Talk about this guy just because he's cool for a second. 2017, Tennessee started a new hunt called the Velvet Hunt. That's private. That was private land only. It took place in the last weekend in August. And I had some good bucks that I was chasing. First day, first 2 days, couldn't quite catch up to them. Got down towards the end of the 3-day hunt and got an opportunity at this guy, this cool little 8-pointer I had a bunch of trail camera pictures of, and took the shot. It was an awesome hunt, perfect shot. Everything was textbook. You can also check that video out on the Rocky Top Bow Hunting channel. I think it's, Tennessee Velvet Hunt might be the name of it. But a really cool hunt, great video. And it's a velvet buck. I wasn't sure if that would be an every year thing, which Tennessee has done it, I think, every year since then. This is 2018. I don't know if I said 2017 or 2018. But they did do it this year as well. But I wanted to make sure I killed a good buck in velvet with that opportunity because I wasn't sure if I would get it again. And we have since then, but I wasn't able to connect on a buck this year either. So really glad I took that deer. Really excited to have him on the wall in velvet. Made for a pretty cool European mount because you don't see many European velvet mounts. So I think it's actually a pretty hard thing to do. But really happy with him. Alright, well, this is a 2-for-1 here. This is also 2018. You can also check it out on Rocky Top Bow Hunting's channel. This is I think East Tennessee 11 points, what it's called. He's actually just a mainframe 6-pointer with a bunch of extra junk. Well, mainframe 8-pointer, he's got little G3s. That was probably one of the coolest days we've ever had in the deer woods. Like I just showed you, the Velvet European mount, I killed him during the Velvet Hunt. fast forward opening weekend of bow season. Didn't hunt on Saturday because I'd already gotten a buck. I wasn't super anxious, didn't want to take off work. But me and Logan decided to hunt Sunday. Sunday morning, I'd already killed a buck, like I said, Logan hadn't. So we both took our bows in, but he was the shooter. He kills the 8-pointer, which is also on the channel. Logan's big 8-pointer or something, is I think's the title. But he kills that morning. We get it out, take it to the processor, come back, get in the stand. Notice it starts getting dark. Looked on our phones at the radar, and there was a big storm moving in. So we get down, run to the gas station, get a snack, come back. The rain's just stopping as we're getting out of the vehicle. Run back into the stand, climb up the sticks, or run back to the tree, climb up the sticks. We're watching the whole time, and as soon as I step in the stand, I see this buck. Hadn't seen the buck all summer. He just popped up on trail camera about a day or two before season. And at the time, I thought he was an 8-pointer. His brow tines were so big that from the side they stuck up and looked like G2s. But actually it was his brow tines. But the morning Logan killed his buck, we saw this buck from the stand and noticed he was really, really cool. And it took about 45 minutes as they were feeding around on some of that clear-cut growth and stuff, and then they finally started coming down the hill a little before dark. Made a really good shot, got stuck at full draw for like a minute or a minute and a half. Logan filmed me. Awesome, awesome hunt, and a super cool deer. This deer has tons of character. Probably one of my favorite as far as racks, a Tennessee deer I've killed. As you can see, he's got huge brow tines, a bunch of extra points on his bases. He's got a cool little white patch on his snout that I didn't even notice the night I killed him until I started looking at pictures after the fact. But this deer just has tons and tons and tons and tons of character. The fox is probably one of my favorite mounts too. He's a red fox, killed him with a rifle late in deer season. Got him mounted, made for a really, really cool mount. I just wanted to add one thing, that this deer is also a Mackenzie 6900 wall pedestal. Like I said, one of my favorites. Alright, well, here's another familiar one. Before I forget about it, this is the Mackenzie 8900. It's a really steep full turn, and it turned out awesome. I am so happy with this mount. I think he will get a lot of attention. The taxidermist said everybody that come in up there at the shop was asking about this deer and this mount. I think it turned out really, really good. But this is also a familiar one. This is this year, my Tennessee buck that I was really, really excited about. I actually had pictures of this deer from immediately. As soon as I put out cameras, 1st of August, last of July, he popped up, stayed the whole time. Was actually trying to kill him during the velvet hunt and didn't hunt Saturday afternoon and chose to fish my last kayak fishing tournament, and wouldn't you know it, he showed up in daylight that evening. Couldn't catch up with him the first few weeks of bow season, and I had 2 days there right around Columbus Day, and I actually killed him on Columbus Day, but I had 2 days that were an absolute debacle. Trying to hunt the other property that I hunt. I was fighting with the neighbor. He's ruining my food plot and stuff. And it was just I was so frustrated and kind of down in the dumps. And wouldn't you know it, that night was the night I killed him. So that's actually a regret I have. I kind of wish I left some kind of rough language in the video where I killed him, because it showed you just how frustrated I was. Looking back on it now, probably wish I would have just taken that out. But you live and you learn. You realize just how frustrated and mad I was at that time. But this is by far the biggest Tennessee deer that you've seen so far. He's 120 inches. If he'd had any kind of mass really whatsoever, or the G3 was a little more or something, you know, he would have been real close to gross and Pope and Young. There's really not much I can do on this lighting. We're just going to have to deal with it. But last but not least, we have my Illinois deer from this year. And this deer, I killed him and I enjoyed it. But after that moment, I found him and sat there and looked at him and enjoyed it and took the moment in for several minutes there. It was like, boom, I was off to the races again. And I was trying to get him out as quick as I could, get him cut up as quick as I could, or skinned as quick as I could, get camp tore down as quick as I could, and get to Ohio as quick as I could. So I didn't really get to look at him and just appreciate the deer as much. You know, I've went back and watched that video several times since then. Made for an awesome video, and that whole Illinois series is really good. If you hadn't checked it out, check it out on the channel now. But you can follow me day by day. I love doing that on my out-of-state hunts because you can kind of feel and see when I'm starting to get close to them. But this deer, having him on the wall now, I have just stared at him a lot because from this angle right here, head on, he is a really impressive deer. He's tall, wide. He didn't have long beams, and I knew when I shot him what he was. And I'd seen so many 2-year-old deer and under. Going up there, my goal was a 3-year-old deer, but when I shot him, I knew that he was going to be right at that Pope and Young mark, gross wise. And he ended up being a little short. I think he was 123 inches, but he had just such short beams. That's what killed him. But as far as strategy, hunting, everything I'd learned on all these deer that I've showed you, I put into this Illinois hunt. I'd went up in the spring. I'd bounced around to a bunch of different areas, which I do a lot on my out-of-state hunts. And I started getting onto some deer, and I started just sucking it in and getting closer and closer and closer, and had that couple encounters with a really big deer. But strategy-wise, this hunt is my favorite hunt I've ever done. That solo Illinois hunt is by far my favorite hunting trip, favorite hunts, everything. It was awesome. Even if I hadn't killed a deer, just how I went about hunting, that trip was fantastic. And thankfully, I did kill a deer, and he's on the wall. And every time I look at this deer, I think about that trip and how awesome it was and how much I learned during that trip, and just kind of the direction that that trip has put me on for the future, on where I'm going to hunt and how I'm going to hunt and what I want to do. So it's a very, very important deer to me. I love looking at him. I love that trip. Love everything about it. So try not to get too long-winded, but as usual, I always do. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them.